Hello, everyone. We're going to wait a couple of minutes here to let folks get connected into the webinar. So just stand by. All right, we're going to just wait another minute or so and let people get connected here. So just stand by a bit longer. We'll get started soon. Okay, I think we're going to kick things off, get started here. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, ONUG webinar, titled Building the Enterprise Multi-Cloud Backbone. My name is Steve Collins. I'm your moderator today. Our panelists who will be joining us are Rod Stellmuller. He's the VP of Marketing at Aviatrix. And we have Toby Fox, who is Director of Cloud Network Operations at Informatica. Toby is an Aviatrix customer, and he'll be sharing some of his valuable insights with us today. Before we start, note that towards the end, there'll be time for questions. So feel free at any time to enter your questions. You can do that through the Q&A tab in the Zoom dashboard, and we'll collect those, and towards the end, both Rod and Toby will be happy to answer any questions you have. And before I pass the baton here to Rod to get started, let me just take a second here to kind of set the stage. Within the ONUG community, we've kind of come together here with the goal of really to drive a set of reference solutions that address the kind of common challenges that enterprises face running application workloads across these hybrid multi-cloud environments. So today's webinar is not only kind of highly relevant to the community, but it also covers a topic that probably isn't on most people's radar. I mean, everyone knows enterprise networking is highly complex, whether we're talking about the data center or the wide area network. So it's probably no surprise that multi-cloud networking can also be very complex, especially as you start to scale out your application deployments. That could be across multiple cloud providers, increasing the number of virtual private clouds, and of course the number of users and sites that are accessing these virtual private clouds. The long and the short is you end up with a complex mesh of connections between all these things, and some significant challenges and ones that may not be obvious to the uninitiated. You get problems related to network performance, protection against security threats in the cloud, and also just ensuring resilience while maintaining high availability. So I think we've got an interesting and relevant topic for today. And with that, let me turn things over to Rod.
Thanks, Steve. Today, we're going to go through a little bit of what Aviatrix does in terms of networking and security services for the multi-cloud enterprise and how these are applied to building the enterprise multi-cloud backbone. So from an agenda standpoint, we'll start by talking about kind of Aviatrix in general, what we're about. We'll talk about some of the intelligent orchestration and control that we have through our controller. We'll talk about embracing and extending native cloud constructs, which is really an important piece about what we're doing, giving customers the flexibility to use any cloud, but through an abstraction layer that allows them to take advantage of both the existing constructs, but then extend those and add advanced features. And we'll talk about those advanced networking and security services. And then one of our customers, Informatica, is going to give a perspective from their point of view. And Toby Fox, who's the Director of Cloud Networking Operations at Informatica, will talk a little bit about that and then be available for Q&A afterwards as we go through all of this. So many of you have probably not heard of Aviatrix. We actually have many customers out there, over 300 across many industries and geographies, as you can see here. This is just a sampling of some of our customers, a lot in the software and technology area and financial services. You can see some there in the consumer internet services, education, retail, energy, pharmaceuticals, all the way through. And you'll see how as we go through this, many of them are taking advantage of the capabilities that we're offering as they go and build their enterprise multi-cloud backbones. So let's just start a little bit by starting at the very high level that everybody can understand and then drill into where Aviatrix fits here. So as everyone knows, you've got the public cloud infrastructures out there, and this essentially is where you're able to do infrastructure as a service and get virtual compute, storage, and network. This is all on top of the hyperscalers' physical infrastructure. So they're building the physical infrastructure and then offering as a service these compute, storage, and network instances that you can spin up in the cloud. Now, within these clouds, they have virtual private clouds, essentially walled gardens that give you the ability to put this compute, storage, and network and build out application environments in what essentially becomes a virtualized version of the physical data centers that many customers have had in the past. But this is moving very quickly, where it used to take months or years to build out a physical data center with all of the networking and compute and everything that goes with that. Of course, the power, the cooling, everything else. Now you can spin this up on top of the cloud environments in a virtual environment. On top of that, the cloud providers provide other constructs, networking, security, operations, and other extensions on top of these virtual private clouds. Now, the challenge here is, as Amazon will say, go build. Take these constructs that we're providing to you, except there's significant assembly required here. So many customers have faced do-it-yourself, having to build out these constructs and actually make these connections happen. And this is where Aviatrix comes in. Aviatrix, because we abstract this, actually give you the ability to do this for you. Aviatrix will build these connections and maintain these connections for you in a way that makes it much easier to do. And this is the same across all. I'm using AWS here as an example, but you have the same but different constructs in Google Cloud or in Azure, and Aviatrix will abstract that so that they look the same. So if we look at this, essentially, if I had two regions within AWS, I'm going to leverage those constructs, those underlying constructs, by embracing the native constructs and then extending with advanced features. And you can see that abstraction layer on top of the Azure constructs or on top of the Google Cloud constructs as well. So that gives us a platform for delivering network and security services for the multi-cloud enterprise. And this begins with an intelligent orchestration and control system that will go across all of the services, both the native constructs as well as our advanced services. And we deliver advanced networking services that we're going to talk about, advanced security services that we talk about, operational services, and then extensions, which we'll talk specifically in this presentation about our extension for Palo Alto Networks VM series firewalls. So at the core of all of this is the Aviatrix controller. And the Aviatrix controller provides management and control across all the networking and security objects that it has under management. And this includes the native constructs in AWS or in Azure or in Google Cloud Platform, as well as all of the VPC or VNet attachments, all the routing tables that are associated with those, any site to cloud links that are being connected to the multi-cloud backbone. It will do SAML-based OpenVPN user profiles that we'll talk about in detail as we go through the presentation. The Aviatrix gateways are essentially software that runs on a cloud instance that provides the advanced services that we'll be talking about and the ability to manage next generation firewall connections in the enterprise multi-cloud backbone. So let's start with the advanced networking features, just to give you a grounding of some of the things that we do here. So as I mentioned, this starts with the Aviatrix controller. Now, leveraging the controller and only the native constructs, for example, in one region of AWS, we have the ability to orchestrate the deployment of the AWS Transit Gateway, Direct Connects, VPC attachments. We're going to automate the route table propagation. So think of the controller as essentially the ability to support BGP propagation of routes without BGP. The Aviatrix controller understands what VPCs are out there and what VPCs are supposed to be able to communicate with each other through the transit gateway. So it takes all of the routing and manages all those route tables across all the VPCs. Now, this might be something that if you had 2 or 3 VPCs, you could do manually. But once you get to tens or hundreds, or with some customers, thousands of VPCs, this manual propagation of routes becomes very difficult and hard to manage. We can also do this across multiple accounts. So many enterprises actually have multiple AWS accounts within their company, and we have the ability to manage all of these routes across multiple accounts and allow for role-based authentication to allow the customer's different accounts to come in and manage specifically the route tables for their accounts. And then we can do network segmentation. So while segmentation is often thought as a security feature, this ability is essentially done by managing the route tables. So by simply managing the route tables, we can say that this group of VPCs has the ability to talk to another group of VPCs or to a specific VPC without actually going through, say, a firewall filter, just simply managing the route tables that are there. So again, this is only the Aviatrix controller, which runs on, say, an EC2 instance and takes advantage of the native constructs. Now, if you look at the native constructs, there are capabilities that it cannot perform. For instance, the AWS Transit Gateway is only a single region product. It can't do multi-region networking so that you can have VPCs in one region talking to VPCs in the other region through the transit gateway. So by adding the Aviatrix gateway and managing that through the Aviatrix controller, we have the ability to connect multiple regions. So this starts to build what you can think of as the enterprise multi-cloud backbone. Of course, this is a single cloud AWS. But with that same gateway, we can connect into Google Cloud Platform, we can connect into Azure, and we can then start bringing other things onto this multi-cloud backbone. So for instance, remote users, we'll talk about doing a secure SAML remote VPNs into this multi-cloud backbone and what you can do there. Branch offices and connecting this into the multi-cloud backbone and giving a branch office the ability to reach resources, VPCs and VNets that are running in other clouds. And then of course, some companies are looking at IoT and how they're going to bring all of that IoT information into their cloud platforms, and we provide that capability as well. One of the other capabilities that the Aviatrix Gateway provides is the ability to do high performance encryption. So in most cases, a connection, a IPsec encrypted link is only going to get 1 gigabit per second of throughput. And this is because the instance is only using one core of the instance to do IPsec. What we have figured out how to do is multi-core IPsec processing. So we distribute the processing across multiple cores. This gives you the ability to use a very large instance, for example, to get up to 23 gigabits per second of IPsec encryption on a 25 gig link. So this is one of the advanced capabilities that the gateways can deliver. So now let's move to security services and start talking about a little bit of the advanced security features. But first we can start with a very simple use case, but very powerful that we see a lot of our customers using. And this is secure distributed egress services. So many times VPCs have applications that are running, and those applications need to be able to go out to the internet to get a build package, for instance, to fire up that application. Now, you would typically use a NAT gateway to do this, but if you have to filter on an IP address, that becomes very difficult when you're going to a specific domain in order to get that build package. So our NAT gateway essentially replaces the AWS NAT gateway, but gives you fully qualified domain name filtering. So this allows you to say anything that's going to go out to the internet from this VPC can only go to these particular addresses. So this makes it so that if a virus, for instance, gets on the application, it's not going to be able to start communicating with some server out on the internet that it's trying to send information to. It would only be able to, for example, go to GitHub, which is where it would get its build packages. Now let's talk about our smart SAML VPN service. And I'll kind of walk through this so you can see some of the capabilities that it has. And of course, it starts again with the controller being able to spin up the transit gateway and the VPCs and understand all of the routing to each one of these locations. Now, it doesn't have to use the AWS Transit Gateway. You can actually use this service when you're just doing independent VPCs or VPC peering, or however you might be connecting your VPCs. The first thing you would do is understand the different types of users you have. It could be partners or contractors or even employees that are either remote or even in the office, because what we're going to do is apply profiles to each one of these users so that when they authenticate in, we have a profile that says exactly where they're able to get in your enterprise multi-cloud backbone. Then you launch the gateways that we're going to use to do that filtering and provide that VPN capability. Now, automatically, we'll spin up a load balancer here so that the users only need one type of certificate. You don't have to say, okay, if you're coming through this VPN, you have to use this certificate, and if you're going through this VPN, you have to use a different certificate. We make it so that they can have one certificate and then load balance out to multiple of our gateways. Then you connect those gateways to your enterprise identity provider. So in this case, you can use Active Directory, you can use SAML, you can use Duo for two-factor authentication, you can any authentication method that you want. Then you provision customized OpenVPN certificates to each user, and then those users have access to very specific things. So this particular user can only access the partner VPC, for instance. This contractor can only go into the partner VPC. And then finally, having the ability to access multi-cloud resources wherever those are. And we have all of the monitoring capability, all of the logging capability to understand what people are doing over that VPN connection as well. So now let's look at some of the operational services. So first of all, we use it leveraging this ability for the controller to understand everything that's connected and how they're connected. We can give a global visibility of your entire multi-cloud network. And this gives you visual link status. Is the link up? Is it down? Is it in a state where it needs to be looked at? What is the link latency? What's the latency I'm getting across these particular links between these different VPCs across my multi-cloud environment? We have the ability to drill in and look at things like VPC attachments and security domains. So very quickly I can drill in and find out in this particular domain what has access to what in a very visual way. I have the ability to have troubleshooting tools that go across multi-clouds. In this case, we're looking at a application we call Flight Path, where I can pick a particular resource that would exist in a VPC and a resource that would exist in another VPC, and then I can ask, is there a connection there? And it will tell me there is a connection and you can communicate between these two resources, or there's not, and this is the rule, for instance, that's blocking the fact that it can communicate. This is very powerful for application developers who want to find out, can they reach an application that they're looking for? And then we have DevOps Automation. So in this case, basically anything that we've created here can be pushed out to a Terraform script so that if you want to apply this to DevOps, you can do that. And in the same vein, we have REST API browser. So everything that you can do through the controller, through the orchestrator, can be done via REST API if you want to plug it into your own scripts. And then let's quickly look at extensions to partner extensions that we provide. In this case, I'll be talking about Palo Alto Networks and how we can build what we call a firewall network to bring Palo Alto Networks into the multi-cloud backbone. If you look at having to bring a Palo Alto Networks VM series into, for instance, the transit gateway without Aviatrix, you're going to be forced to, for instance, use an IPsec connection. This is going to reduce the performance down to about 500 megabits per second when the VM series actually has the capability to do 6 gigabits per second. It's also going to force you to use SNAT, so you'll lose visibility as you scale using ECMP. So using Aviatrix, we actually do a lot of things. One, we're using the controller, so we're going to automate the propagation of routes everywhere that these routes need to go and what needs to be sent to the firewalls. We're going to remove the need for IPsec, so you're going to be able to maximize the performance and get 6 gigabits per second to each one of the VM series. And we're going to remove the requirement to use SNAT when doing scale out. So we make it a much smoother operation, get super high performance, and be able to maintain source address visibility. So in the end, you build this multi-cloud backbone with network and security services that are operating as an abstraction on top of the hyperscaler infrastructure. I think now, Steve, we're going to turn over to Toby to talk a little bit about his experience.
Yeah, thank you, Rod. And yeah, Toby, you are an Aviatrix customer, and be interesting to hear you describe some of the challenges you encountered with multi-cloud networking. So take it away.
Sure, thank you. So real quick, my name is Toby Fox with Informatica. We are a huge data integrator. We do a lot of data management. You know, I hate to say we've got lots of transactions, but you know, we're in the trillions of transactions, which is just unbelievable, and we're growing like crazy as far as the number of transactions that are passing through our systems. In the old days, we used to just say, hey, we were just a data integrator, and all we were looking at was for integrating tools. And but recently we've started expanding out into multiple different solutions, especially in our data quality and metadata management. You can see that in all 5 spaces that the company itself competes in, we're always up and top and to the right as leaders in our field. I am not a sales guy for the company, so I don't even want to go there, but all I wanted to show basically was that being at the top puts, you know, we have a huge amount of growth in a lot of companies, or we do business with a lot of companies, and it continues to grow. And in this world, especially, being average in the pack won't get you very far. So one of the things we look at doing is trying to stay up. You know, this is kind of our slide of, you know, thousands of customers, and a lot of them you'll see. But what we're doing is integrating data from hundreds of different systems for each one of these customers. We might include the sales information from one system to the their customer list or their inventory or their sales inventory, etc. And we're taking all those pieces of information from different systems and combining them together. What that means is that every single customer has a lot of different, very specific use cases for their own data, and that we're trying to integrate them all together. We have to have, by nature, a very flexible and capable system that's allowing all of these to work. We have some customers that require us to not be in Amazon. Like, it doesn't care where it is as long as it's not Amazon, because, you know, they're a retail shop that doesn't, you know, their number one competitor is Amazon. And we have other customers that say, whatever you do, you can't use Microsoft. You know, we're a software shop and we don't want to compete with or give business to our competitor. So what we end up being is kind of a catch between the two, where we have some customers that do not want to be on Amazon, and we have some customers that do not want to be in Azure or Google. So ultimately, we have to offer our services in any one of the 3 and work according to what they need. So from our use case, we're looking at a couple big, huge things here. One of them is that a lot of the data we're working with is not actually user data, but it's back-end system talking to back-end system. So for example, a sales database talking to a inventory database. Those systems don't generally mean that they're publicly accessible. It's not something you can log into a website on. So we're talking to systems that are nestled deep within a company. And so we need a secure way to get to them so that we can manage and manipulate that data. So a traditional simple HTTPS website wouldn't meet our needs. And that's where we look to Aviatrix to say, hey, I need a secure method, and I need something that's very flexible that will work with all of these different companies and every one of their use cases that makes them specific to them. I laugh that some of the biggest benefits for a customer also happens to be the biggest benefits for us. We need something that's easy to configure and set up, and that doesn't take us weeks or months to set up a traditional VPN, and need you know, guys with CCIEs to set up a VPN. We need something that, you know, we can click a few buttons, talk with a few of their networking guys, and have a simple solution right up, easy. But then we also need something that we set it up 2 years ago and it's worked fine for 2 years, but then all of a sudden something goes wrong or something changes, and what in the world do you do? So going back and looking at something that was set up by different employees who knows how long ago can be very challenging. So having the ability to monitor VPNs or troubleshoot the VPNs is critical to us. You know, if something goes wrong, was it the customer that made a change? Is it the network in between that has the problem, or is it something even on our side? And having that simple, easy to look at interface right up in front that will give you, you know, details about that connection is critical to us. The other thing that happens is, you know, moving at the speed of business, as we like to say, having something that can be brought up quickly and easily. You know, in years past, it could take weeks or, you know, multiple weeks to bring up a VPN tunnel, and now we're doing it in basically a phone call and a few button clicks. So that's really important to the business, in that we can not be the bottleneck waiting for the network to be ready for them to start doing their business. The other problem, as I kind of already described, is that, anyway, I already talked about it, but having multiple clouds with multiple VPCs and multiple customers across each has a huge complexity layer that makes it very difficult for us to manage. You know, hey, which cloud provider are you in? Which region are you in? Which VPC within that region are you in? And then trying to figure out how to connect them together is super challenging. We have hundreds and hundreds of VPCs in Amazon alone, and trying to get all of them to talk together. And then, as Rod talked about, getting them to configure and bring up a solution, getting its configuration information from a standard location, and doing that in the old traditional way. You'd have to do that for each and every VPC. But now what we do is build a simple, repeatable solution that every time you turn it on, it automatically gets its information and automatically goes and gets its configs specifically for that environment, and nothing more than a simple couple clicks and a name and an IP address range on our side to build. So not only are we using like Terraform and some of the simple configuration scripts to build the VPC and the services within the VPC, but we're also using it to build the VPN connection through Aviatrix to connect it to the rest of the network. And I think one of the points is that, you know, you can't build it for a single cloud provider anymore. You know, everybody kind of thinks that if you're a Amazon expert and you know Amazon really well, that you can just, you know, flip over to Azure and be an Azure expert because you know Amazon really well. But there's so many idiosyncrasies and special use cases for each. It can be very difficult to manage each one the same. And so having a third-party extraction layer that means I don't have to have an expert in Azure and in Amazon and in GCP. I just need to have somebody that knows our system, and then they can use the tools that are available to them to work across all of them. Is a huge advantage to us. I guess one of the other big use cases for us is that with being such a large system with so many different VPCs and so many different clouds, having a single pane of glass that will allow us to look at everything with, you know, a simple place to look is huge. So the controllers and their ability to look at the map and say, hey, this is the current status and what we're looking at is huge. It means a lot for us to be able to quickly and easily troubleshoot a particular communication or a particular problem by simply going to one site and having it available, not going to multiple regions or multiple cloud providers and multiple VPCs, but one to kind of look at all of them over the top of it all. I think I had one more. When you're looking at building a multi-cloud environment, you know, almost everybody will start out in one or the other. I've been at companies that started out in Azure and wanted to move to AWS, and I've been at others that we started out in AWS years and years ago and now starting to look at GCP. But the trick to all of them is making a robust enough design that will work in all of them, where you can fill in the details for each and every environment. So for example, in AWS, you might consider VPCs within a region, like in, you know, the East Coast or in the West Coast. but in Amazon, they're region specific, but in GCP, they're more global. So you can build a VPC and say this VPC can be reached globally, and you don't necessarily need one for every region. So by building a design that's kind of flexible enough and simple enough, you can actually have a template and then use that template to be specific for each specific environment. But each one deals a little differently. So a Terraform script that you build in Amazon may not work in GCP, but with some small modifications to how that Terraform script works, the base is still there. You can just change some of the specific API calls or some of the specific settings and have them work in both. The other big, huge advantage for us, or one of the big considerations, is how much involvement we need from a customer. If you're talking, 4 or 5 times to a customer with 3 or 4 of their networking experts talking to your networking experts and getting everybody on the same page and agree, not only is time consuming, but it's technically challenging trying to get everybody, even the same language sometimes, to speak. The nice part about using a solution like this is that it kind of takes all the specialness out of a Cisco config or a Palo Alto config and kind of talks a generic IPsec language, so that a customer's experts in Cisco know the standards of what they're doing compared to our side, which we're using the Aviatrix solution. We can kind of all start at a base, simple solution. Basically, we have a single configuration call to get started. Once that call is going, we basically send them a config, they configure their side, we configure our side. In a perfect world, that can be a 20-minute call and we never have to talk again, and the VPN comes right up. And we've had other calls where, the customer didn't really know how to spell VPN, let alone what a VPN was. And so we had to work with them, what is a VPN? Why are we doing it? Here's the config that you're going to be putting onto your box called a firewall, and showing them the actual config and actual configuration statements that you can just download right from the Aviatrix controller is huge. It's nice to have. I guess that was the big parts. I guess we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, no, just add here, you can see, we'll leave this slide up for just a little bit, but you can always get to Aviatrix at info@aviatrix.com, or go to our website and you'll see the little chat box in the bottom that you can see here in the bottom right. And that's normally staffed by our solution architects. So this isn't like an inside sales team. This is actually people who can answer very technical questions. So feel free to ask a technical question, and if we need to get back to you, we will, but most of the time you'll get an answer right away.
Yeah, thanks, Rod, and thank you, Toby, for talking through your multi-cloud journey, your experience with Aviatrix. So at this time, we have time for Q&A. So if you have any questions for Toby or Rod, you can go to your Zoom dashboard, and there is a tab there for accessing the Q&A and entering your questions. I actually have one I wanted to ask to both of you, Rod and Toby. When enterprises are starting to kind of scale up and scale out their multi-cloud networks, is there a typical first kind of big surprise or big gotcha, or are there one or more of those? Maybe Toby, you could start there, since
Sure.
You've been on the journey.
Yeah, so definitely one of the challenges that we've found was that we've been Amazon experts for 10 plus years now, and then when we go to do like Azure, or even more recently GCP, the solution is largely the same and the function is largely the same, but the specifics of how they actually got there is entirely different. A design that worked great for us in Amazon for years and years may not actually be the best design in GCP. So one of the biggest challenges for us is that it was not a simple, I'll call it cookie cutter approach that worked well in Amazon doesn't necessarily work well in GCP. So while pieces and parts are still there and we can still use the large like Terraform or Aviatrix for connectivity. The general design has changes in it that has definitely been a challenge that, you can't necessarily force the AWS design in a different cloud provider. And so you need to kind of look at each cloud provider as a different solution. What each one brings can be different and design accordingly. There's no one size fits all for all three providers. Probably the biggest challenge that we've had.
Yeah, Rod, what are you saying, Rod?
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, that's exactly what we see from many of our customers. I think one surprise that they get is that, customers need multi-cloud for many different reasons. And the big cloud providers aren't providing them a solution for that because they don't want a multi-cloud solution. They want their solution. And so, I don't think they've reached the point where they understand that for the customer's business, they need a multi-cloud solution. And we're there now being able to provide that to them to overcome some of the challenges that normally you would think they could go to the big cloud providers to provide a solution. They're just not moving in that direction at this point.
And the other thing that's interesting, just to add to it, is that some cloud providers know that they don't do well in a particular space, so they'll try to convince you or guide you in a different direction away from the solution that you're looking for. For example, AWS does not do a great job on their native VPNs, for example, and they require special BGP with special configs, and it's very restrictive. And some customers will not allow an AWS native VPN, but AWS doesn't want to tell you that. So you need to be able to look for other solutions and say, hey, we don't necessarily need the AWS native solution that, of course, AWS wants you to use, because it just doesn't work in all environments for all customers.
Yeah. Toby, another question here for you. What did you have to implement on the customer site during initial setup?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the important parts is, as a provider to a customer, the least amount of work we can do with the customer, the whole point is provide a solution for the customer with the least amount of work and the least amount of setup on their part as possible. So our designs have to work with whatever design works for them. Some of them want Palo Alto, or some want Cisco, or some don't even want a firewall, and they want us to provide a gateway for them. But the whole design is to do as little interaction, I don't want to say interaction, but as little requirement from the customer as possible to give them as much of a turnkey solution as possible. So, at the very least, it's a VPN connection to the existing infrastructure that they already have set up. And basically, we agree on a set of IP addresses and a set of, I'll say, conversations, ports and protocols, et cetera, from one device to another. And, it may be no physical requirement from a customer, all the way up to sometimes customers want to go buy a specific device specifically for this conversation dedicated to us only. And it's flexibility and, capability on our side that is what is required by the customer. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I think that was good.
And let me just add to that, because I think Informatica has a very powerful, unique solution where they're bringing their customers into the multi-cloud. Many of our customers are just going to the cloud in general, and that simplicity of doing that is actually an important part of what Aviatrix provides. Because many, early on over the last, say, 5 or 10 years, as people have been kind of investigating the cloud, there's been a lot of the very technical do-it-yourselfers who are willing to get in there and tweak and change and understand and get down in dirty. But as we've now moved to the broader enterprises actually making the decision to move en masse to the public cloud, they really need a simple solution. And this is one of the things that Aviatrix does is make it a lot easier to actually move into the cloud without having to understand and build out all the constructs yourself.
Another question for you, Rod. Does the Aviatrix Transit Orchestrator with AWS Transit Gateway support high availability and VPC segmentation?
Wow, that's a pretty detailed, but yes, absolutely. You know, high availability is essentially the ability to run our gateways on multiple instances so that there's failover. And we can do high availability within an availability zone or across availability zones as well. So you can have high availability on the gateways. The controller essentially runs on one instance, but none of the traffic actually moves through the controller. So basically it pushes information out to the gateways and to the native constructs. And so if a controller goes down, everything continues to work and you just bring the controller back up. I think did that answer the whole question? I can't remember the...
Yeah, well, about the VPC segmentation piece.
Oh, VPC segmentation. Yeah, that's actually an important capability because a lot of times customers want to be able to say a particular VPC can talk to another. You might have, for instance, a dev VPC and a test VPC and a production VPC. And of course, you don't want anything in the test or dev to be able to talk to production. So being able to segment VPCs or groups of VPCs from each other or enable communication between them is a powerful feature that we do by managing the routes in the route table as opposed to, say, for instance, putting a firewall and doing filtering in there.
As a real world example, that's a great use case for Informatica. We have different rules and different people accessing different types of environments. So we have our own QA or development teams that are allowed to get to a QA environment, but we never let a QA or dev team to our production customer-facing environments. Even though they're very similar in design and structure and implementation, we have very different rules on who's allowed to access what. So it's an important feature for us.
Another question here. I'm not sure if the native AWS Transit Gateway supports Direct Connect yet. Can Aviatrix help with this?
Yes, it does support Direct Connect, and we essentially take the way Direct Connect works is it propagates BGP from the direct connection on the customer site into the transit gateway, and then we pick up those routes and manage the propagation of those routes out to any of the other VPCs, which would normally be a manual process as you spin up a different VPC and want it to be able to talk to your on-prem data center. You would have to manually update those route tables, and we're going to do that in an automated way through the orchestration system.
Yeah, Rod, just touching on that briefly, I mean, relative to manual route propagation, I mean, if you start to scale things up to the level that like Toby described, I mean, just how painful does that become?
Well, Toby would probably know better, but certainly you can imagine having to update thousands of route tables because you decided to add another VPC or take one away could become a pretty tough problem.
Yeah, even for us, just one modification per week times literally hundreds of VPCs and thousands of route tables within those VPCs can be a multi-week process with multiple engineers. So you either throw people at it or you throw technology at it. And people, throwing people at a solution means that you're inherently running a risk of not getting it done right. And then you add more time and more troubleshooting and more labor to do something over and over again. And so it compounds, it's a compounding problem. It gets worse and worse with every change you do and every VPC you add. So. Yeah,
so Toby, so it sounds like the ROI from your perspective is really all about saving time and saving resources in terms of people's time, correct?
Sure. And at the scales that we're talking, there's a point where more and more people doesn't fix the problem. a single route change across 400, 500 VPCs in just Amazon alone. You know, you can throw 10 engineers at it and everybody does a few each, but that's still 20 something routes per person per day, and it just doesn't work. So,
and that doesn't include the errors that propagate if someone
exactly. And it's not the errors that you find immediately, it's the error 6 months down the line when something changes and doesn't work right, and then you realize that a change was done 6 months ago that doesn't work that way, you know.
Here's a question. Can Aviatrix connect into an enterprise customer's SD-WAN to connect to their VPCs or private clouds to connect to clouds not on the SD-WAN?
Okay.
So that's kind of what we're doing. We're connecting. So for Informatica, we have connection requests to customers' LAN, you know, their network within their network. And so we can build a VPN tunnel to a specific region, to a specific product or whatever. But it's kind of separate of their SD-WAN as far as what they have configured within their network. So I guess we're doing connections to VPNs that are not within a SD-WAN, but I don't know is that it would be used for intercompany, you know, within the same company's communication between them.
Yeah. In theory, there's a way to do that. That's not something that a lot of our customers are doing quite yet, but certainly that we're managing the routes and the route propagation and having an understanding of how things are connected, we could manage those routes and make sure that communication could occur or not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're ready to wrap up here. Doesn't look like we have any more questions flowing in. And Rod, could you go to the next slide, please?
Yeah, let's jump down one here.
And
next slide.
Yeah. So, you know, concluding our webinar, I want to make sure everyone knows that they're invited to join the ONUG community in New York in October. So that's for the fall event. ONUG conducts a spring event and a fall event. And this event will include a 2-day conference, sort of multi-track conference, some educational tracks that kind of run in parallel to the conference. We've got vendor exhibits, a large number of vendor exhibits, and also proof of concept presentations. And we have quite a few of those queued up as well. So it's a very, very kind of content heavy, packed agenda that ONUG puts on every year, twice a year. And at this conference in the fall, we'll also be launching a couple of new working groups. One is the Orchestration and Automation Working Group, and that actually is going to touch on some of the things we talked about here today, you know, essentially multi-cloud application and network orchestration and automation. Obviously a major challenge for folks here. And we have another working group we'll be launching, which is AI Ops for multi-cloud. So a couple of new exciting working groups are going to kick off. So we hope to see folks there. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into today's webinar. I'd like to thank Rod and Toby for sharing their insights. And I hope you'll be able to attend ONUG's upcoming webinars that we have scheduled for September. I think we have at least 2 on the calendar right now. So goodbye, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you.